we say we are the leading Catholic research university in the world, we can prove it.
When they understand that it's research for the common good, it really is exciting.
So Notre Dame is the only currently religious affiliated institution in the AAU. That's something special.
We only tried for about 20 years to try to get in. So why would you leave this really impressive job to come to Notre Dame?
We probably have here at Notre Dame the best executive team I've ever seen at an AAU institution. But coming here really has reignited my passion for mission.
Does Notre Dame have a role to play in Washington, D.C.?
The leadership here has a unique ability to bring people from different sides of the aisle together in a safe space.
Few university presidents have that convening power.
There are doors that we can open as an institution.
So what are you most excited about?
There's so much great stuff happening. We can't tell all the stories.
Right.
So how do we find the right stories to tell?
From the campus of Our Lady's University, this is For Good, Stories from Notre Dame, a behind-the-scenes glimpse into life under the Golden Dome and the powerful stories that drive Notre Dame to become a force for good in the world. Hello and welcome to For Good, Stories from Notre Dame. Thrilled to be joined today by Pedro Ribeiro, the Vice President for Public Affairs and Communications at the University of Notre Dame. He joined Notre Dame in just October of 2023 after working for more than a decade in the public and nonprofit sectors in Washington, D.C., including his most recent position with the Association for American Universities. So, Pedro, bem-vindo. Como vai? Tudo bem?
Muito obrigado. Muito obrigado.
So I start out that way in Portuguese because I thought it's appropriate. Given, I believe you were born and your parents come from Portugal. Tell us a little bit about that background and a little bit about your family life.
Absolutely. So I was born in Portugal. I was actually born in a very remote part of Portugal called the Azores, which a lot of people don't know, but is a small group of islands kind of literally in the middle of nowhere, almost halfway between the United States and Portugal. Wow. My folks immigrated to the United States when I was 5. So I've been here a long time, but Portuguese, English is my second language. Yeah. Portuguese is my native tongue. And, I think a lot about my journey to the United States, and it's not a dissimilar journey than a lot of people who have immigrated to this country. My family came here. My parents were people of very modest means. My mother worked predominantly as a housekeeper and nanny, and my father worked in a factory. And so it's not an unusual story that a lot of immigrants have. And, the one thing that they instilled in myself and my brother, I have a younger brother, was this idea of the American dream. And how hard work in this country could lead you to really anywhere you wanted to be. And, luckily I find myself in this space, working at a place like Notre Dame. And it's really a testament to them and to the values that they instilled in us that, regardless of all the problems that we see in our country, that it is still a great land of opportunity if you show up and you work hard and, you consistently deliver. And that you're a good person at the end of the day. And I think a lot about those values that they instilled in us. I remember one of the first times I met you, you talked about your parents and in particular your father and mother's work ethic. And that was one of the things is nobody was going to outwork your parents. I always remember growing up that how hard my parents worked to ensure that we certainly didn't have a lot, but that we always had what we needed. Yeah. And that is something that's always stuck with me. And just how hard that they worked to make sure that a lot of it wasn't for them. Right. It was for my brother and I, for us to have kind of the things that they knew that they themselves were not going to be able to have. Right. And it's amazing to watch that. And I think it prepares you in certain ways to go out into the world and then look for that good in other people. Right.
So before we get into talking about your recent work and very impressive work with the Association of American Universities, otherwise known as the AAU. You spent a lot of time in significant roles in federal government. Can you tell us a little bit about this role as public affairs and communication? And you have a tremendous background in both areas. Tell us a little bit about your public affairs background.
So, I was in D.C. for 25 years. I went to college in D.C. I went to the Catholic University of America. which might actually be more Catholic than Notre Dame. Maybe that's a joke, but it's one of the, and it was one of these things where I went there and I never really thought that I would stay in DC.
Right.
And I got into the public policy space and it really captured me. And I really felt, that I was doing good, right? I think it goes back to having come to this country with very little and then seeing the opportunity to kind of pay it back and participate in the civic life of this country meant a lot to me. So I spent several years working on Capitol Hill, predominantly for Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, who actually represents Santa Clara County, which is the area where I grew up and my folks immigrated to when we came to America. So it was an amazing opportunity to work for someone who is a highly regarded legislative leader in the House of Representatives. And, she's been in Congress since 1994. Wow. 30 years, and she's a true staying power and was a committee chairwoman for a long time and was just a truly phenomenal mentor and leader. I learned a lot from her. I then worked in local government for a while. So I worked for Mayor Vincent Gray, who was the mayor of the District of Columbia. Even though he's a mayor, the DC government is more than just a city. It does a lot of the things that a state does. Right. And so I had a great opportunity to learn from Vince. He was a phenomenal leader, a well-known civil rights activist in his own right, and to participate in local government. Anybody who's ever worked in local government knows that local government is the place where government touches the people most directly. Right. And that was just an amazing experience to see that, go to schools and kind of participate in that very ground level civic life of a community was an amazing experience. Then I spent several years working in the Obama administration, first at Immigration and Customs Enforcement, where I was assistant director and ran ICE's public affairs division.
So part of Homeland Security? Part
of Homeland Security. And then I made the transition from ICE to Homeland Security headquarters, where I served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary, running strategic communications for the department under Secretary Jay Johnson, who was also just a phenomenal leader and a wonderful mentor and just a great American, someone who's dedicated huge chunks of his life to serving his country. And I learned a lot from him. And I also served as a senior advisor in his office as well. And it was just an immense experience. And then I transitioned into the nonprofit side after the end of the Obama administration. And
did you go directly to AAU?
I did.
Okay.
And it was, it was one of these stories, I haven't applied for a job in a very long time. Yeah. And, at the very end of the Obama administration, I hadn't really decided what I was going to do. The Trump transition team was coming in and I had a colleague who had for many years served as an executive at Johnson & Johnson. And he said, look, there's this person who just came to Washington. She's the president of the Association of American Universities, which I had never heard of. Yeah. And he said, you should go meet this woman. Her name is Mary Sue Coleman. Well, Mary Sue Coleman wasn't just some random president. She had been the president of the University of Michigan, the president of the University of Iowa. She's one of the most distinguished
She gave
presidents.
the commencement address here to the graduate school at Notre Dame years ago.
Exactly right. A phenomenal scholar. In her own right, scientist and president. And I met Mary Sue and she said, how would you like to come work for me? And so it was this great opportunity. I didn't really know much about higher ed except I had a college degree. Right. And it was an immense learning experience, but I loved every moment of it.
How many years were you at the AAU?
7, a little over 7 years.
7 years. And you handled all, for those that don't know, give people a little bit of a background on what the Association of American Universities actually is.
So the AAU is the association that represents the 71 leading research universities in North America. There are 2 Canadian members and there are 69 American members. And it really is kind of the very top of class universities that do research, right? And not to say that there aren't other great universities, but these are the great research universities, the great R1 universities of the United States. The universities producing the top flight doctoral students and producing top flight research. So it's a very exclusive group to be a member of. And Notre Dame just joined the group last year. And that's actually how I got to know Father John. Yeah. But to be a member of the AAU, you have to be voted in by the rest of the existing members. So it's a pretty hard club to get into.
We only tried for about 20 years to try to get in. Yeah.
And I think what the AAU really is a signal to the rest of the world that you have reached a certain pinnacle. And that really what it says is your faculty and the research they generate are amongst the best in not just America, but the world. Yeah. That's what the AAU signifies. And look, it's an exclusive club.
So it's about half private universities and about half public universities?
Roughly. And I think I think right now there are actually a few more publics than there are privates.
Yeah.
But it is, it's the entirety of the Ivy League. It is schools like Stanford. It is schools like Duke. It is also schools like UCLA and UC San Diego and UC Berkeley, University of Michigan. It's also Indiana and Purdue.
Yeah.
Right. I think it also shows that kind of these states that care a lot about education.
Yeah.
And so it is I don't want to say that it's like a Better Business Bureau seal, but in many ways it is a denoter of quality of the graduate and research side of the institutions.
So you were working for the AAU when Notre Dame was admitted.
Yes, I was.
And so from your perspective, what did that mean for Notre Dame from your previous role perspective? And what did it mean for the AAU for Notre Dame to join?
So Notre Dame is the only currently religious affiliated institution in the AAU. There are other institutions in the AAU that at some point in their life cycle were religious, but they're no longer. Right. So that's something special.
Yeah.
And so I think Notre Dame brings a different flavor to the game than a lot of the other institutions we bring. And so it was really interesting to see that. What does it mean for Notre Dame? It means that when we say we are the leading Catholic research university in the world, we can prove it because we're the only one in the AAU. Yeah. And the reality is higher ed in the United States is really the bedrock of global higher ed, with a few exceptions in Europe and a few in Japan and some in Australia. American universities dominate the global rankings. And that's, I think, a testament to what Notre Dame has done and really what Notre Dame has done in the tenure of Father John.
That's right.
If anything, that membership in the AAU is a testament to what Father John has done here and his leadership and his vision for this institution. When Notre Dame joined the AAU, I actually watched Father John's commencement address. He predicted the future. Right? We are going to be a research university. We're going to focus on research. That's why Notre Dame is a member of the AAU.
In a distinctively Catholic way.
That's exactly right.
So this is somewhat brazen, right? That we enter into the AAU for a few months, and then Father John goes in to recruit you. I was afraid when I knew this was ensuing that the AAU might throw us back out before that we go in and steal their head of communications and public affairs and a really senior role. Tell us a little bit about what you did for the AAU, and then tell us a little bit about that transition, the decision to leave the AAU after several years to come to this newly admitted institution.
Yeah, so my role at the AAU kind of covered a lot of different things. So I ran a very traditional communication shop where a reporter would call and say, what's higher ed doing on issue Y or X, Y, and Z? Yeah. And so we managed kind of that very traditional media operation. We also managed a very sophisticated advocacy side where our role was to tell the importance of research universities in the life of America, right? Research universities play a critical role in the well-being of just about everything, right? Yeah. Many of the AAU institutions have some of the world's leading hospitals, infectious disease research, and COVID is actually a great example of the role that research universities play in keeping a country healthy, right? If it hadn't been for the work that was done at research universities, we wouldn't have mRNA vaccines and there would have been no COVID vaccine. But even AAU institutions were the first place to isolate the virus, the first place to treat the sick. So it just shows. So part of my role at the AAU was to inform Americans, but really more importantly, policymakers about the critical mission that research universities have in keeping America healthy, safe, and strong.
And some would make an argument that higher education in the United States is one of its single most defining significant characteristics as a contribution to the world.
Oh, absolutely. And I think a lot of that comes in kind of the wake of World War II and Vannevar Bush and his ideas to really make American research universities kind of the global leaders in research. And I think, if you look at the great American economic growth in the post-war period, a lot is driven it by innovation done at AAU schools. Look at Stanford and Silicon Valley. Yeah. I mean, it's like that. But the institutions also play roles in culture, UCLA and USC in filmmaking. you know, those two institutions have grown up along with Hollywood.
Right.
Right. And so it's not just in the innovation space. It's also in the culture, in arts, in the humanities, that these institutions have really become global leaders as America has become the global dominant cultural power.
Right.
We're right there along for the ride. We've been there the whole time.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Harvard was founded at the very beginning of the foundation of this country and its roots, and it's still there.
So why would you leave this really impressive job to come to Notre Dame?
I think there are a couple of reasons. So one was Father John, and the quality of the leadership that I saw here when I came to visit. Two was the sense of mission. I spent 20 years in government, and for me, I always knew what the mission was: to serve the American people, and that meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
Having come here with nothing and having then had the opportunity to have all these wonderful things because who we are as a country.
Right.
I felt like I knew what I was doing. And when I went to the AAU, there was a sense of mission. You know, we're working with these great storied institutions, but you were one step removed, right? Like there were no students, right? And so, yeah, I felt there was a sense of mission. But coming here really has reignited my passion for mission. And, you know, I can't thank Father John enough. I owe Father John the greatest debt of gratitude for picking up the phone one day and calling and saying, hey, would you be willing to come and join me for a day on campus? And I think Father John, you know, Notre Dame, brilliant recruiters, right? Let's start with that. But I think Father John wanted to figure out something, which is, would I be a fit, but vice versa? Yeah.
And was this your first visit ever to campus?
I'd never been to campus. Okay. Father John calls me and says, I'd like you to come out. And he said, before you say yes or no, that you're interested in this job, why don't you and I spend some time together to make sure that it's actually going to be a good fit for both of us, and that you're going to be a good fit here, and that you're going to want to come here. He was very clear. We don't want somebody to come here who doesn't really want to be here. Right. And I said, you know, fair enough. I owe that to you to come out here. And then I spent a day with Father John and with you and with other of our colleagues now, Shannon and Marianne Core. You and I had a very wonderful conversation. And Father John and I then had dinner that night at Roars. We sat down together in a little private dining room. And what was supposed to be a very quick dinner ended up, I think, being 2.5, almost 3 hours long. And I got to my room that night and I called my wife and I said, we have to do this. Wow. We have to do this. This is, you know, it's not just the mission of the institution, but it's also—
Leah was like, she was the chief of staff.
So not only did you steal the senior vice president, you also stole the board secretary and the chief of staff, who was my wife. So I think that actually got Father John in more trouble than me. And, you know, it was hard to tell the leadership of the AAU that I was leaving. You know, Barbara Schneider, the president of the AAU, is a wonderful person and a distinguished university president in her own right. She was president of Case Western Reserve. It was even harder to tell the board. You know, I have over the years gotten to know a lot of university presidents through my role. And, you know, having to tell someone like Chris Eisgruber, the president of Princeton, who I deeply respect and think is a phenomenal figure, to say, sorry, I'm leaving, was really hard.
How did they react when you, especially when you told them that you were going to Notre Dame?
So I think a lot of them were like, you know, I think a lot of them were, I think, sad, but I think understood. Because they're on campuses. Right. Most of them have spent their entire lives on campuses, and they understand that sense of call to mission at a campus in direct interaction with students, direct interaction with faculty, and how much that means. So I don't think any of them were truly surprised. I also think, to some extent, I think they were kind of proud and pleased that a place like Notre Dame would come. You know, when someone comes and takes one of your good staffers to do something else and it's something important, there's a certain sense of pride, I think, that gives, you know, look, you know, we prepared this person, they're going off to do something great.
So you've been at the job a little less than a year. You could say the honeymoon's over at this point. What are your takeaways? Was it the right move for you? Have there been some surprises along the way? How does it feel for not only you, but also for Leah?
Yeah, it feels great. Everything that I hoped that the job would be, it's been that and more. The opportunities that we've had have been stunning, both from a professional perspective, but also from a personal perspective. It's also, I think, rekindled my sense of mission. It's also helped us rekindle our own faith a little bit more, to be frank, to be here, to be embraced by the church, and to have that opportunity. Leah and I got to travel to Rome to meet the Holy Father, which was, you can't, it's hard to put that in words. It's very emotional for me. Right. And it's been a phenomenal experience. There are so many good things happening here on campus. Yeah. That we have just such so many riches that sometimes it's hard for us to prioritize. Right. And so that's one thing that I've found that we really got to think about is there's so much great stuff happening. We can't tell all the stories. Right. So how do we find the right stories to tell? Right.
So tell me, there's two kind of aspects to your job, and it's multifaceted, right? Communications, you can look at it, crisis communications, you can look at it, internal communications. Look at everything that we're doing with the media, everything that we're doing on social media channels. There's so much in that space. But then there's also federal government, state government, local as well. So there's layers and layers to all of this. Let's start by talking a little bit about Washington, D.C., where you've come from. In some ways, when in D.C., somebody once described it to me, it's 75 square miles surrounded by reality, right? Because everything seems like a burning issue there. Isn't always a burning issue in the heartland. Does Notre Dame have a role to play in Washington, D.C.? And what has been your experience so far?
So Notre Dame has, I think, a really special role to play in Washington, D.C. because we are the only religiously affiliated institution in the AAU, and because, frankly, of the leadership like someone like Father John. But going all the way back to Father Ted, Notre Dame and the leadership here has a unique opportunity and ability to bring people from different sides of the aisle together in a safe space. That's us. We can do that. And I think we need to do more of that. If you look at Washington, the place is paralyzed and polarized. I think we can play a role by being there and convening people and bringing them together to solve some of the problems that are more important to people in the real world. Let's use that phrase, right? I think it's a role that we are uniquely positioned to do because we are a faith-based
some of the other AAU presidents recognize that.
That's
and
absolutely
said that,
right.
Father John and you can get into meetings with congressmen and women and senators from both the far left and the far right, and you're welcomed by both. Few university presidents have that convening power.
I think that's absolutely right. And it's true. I think Father John there are doors that we can open as an institution for all of higher ed, for the betterment of everyone, that only a place like Notre Dame can do. I think there are conversations that we can help foster and build where we aren't necessarily driving the conversation, but perhaps we're just opening the door for bringing people together. And it is interesting. I mean, Catholic social teaching, frankly, puts Notre Dame outside of the political spectrum. If you look at Catholic social teaching, the pro-life movement is much wider than that. It's anti-death penalty. It's anti-poverty. There is something there for everyone in the entirety of the political spectrum. And that is who we are.
The dignity.
There is the dignity of life.
That's right.
And that is something that can be embraced by different parts and different times and different people. And so we try to bring as many people together for that. And I think that's truly a unique space.
So what are some of the issues you've spent a lot of time back in DC with Father John and other university leaders? What are some of the issues that du jour are top of mind? I mean, there's a lot going on.
There's so much going on in Washington right now. I think democracy and the stabilization of our very own democracy, but also democracy international, something that internationally is something that Father John cares a lot about. We have a democracy initiative that we just launched that I think is going to talk a lot about that. So I think that's a role that we can play. It's a role where our connections, both through the Holy Cross, but also the church, enable us to be a convener and a moderator in other places of the world where I think people understand who we are and are willing to come in and have conversations that we are uniquely positioned to do. And so I think democracy is a place where we can do. I mean, there's a lot of other issues kind of out there, whether it's name, image, and likeness, and ensuring that student athletes stay students first is something that we care a lot about here. And something that Father John has spoken very eloquently a lot about, and with Jack Swarbrick, our now
People of Aqua.
And Jack, who's now the emeritus AD, and People of Aqua, who's now our AD, athletics director. It's something that we've spent a lot of time thinking about. How do we protect the student part of student athletes and ensure that that's the number one thing?
Yeah.
Right. With all this craziness around collectives and NIL and all this, how do we continue to protect that? That's something we've spent a lot of time thinking about.
In the movement to declare them as employees, right? And rather than being colleagues to other students, being colleagues to people like you and me is something that we have some significant.
Absolutely. And it's the wrong thing to do. It commoditizes a relationship that should not be commoditized, right? Yeah. They're students. They're here to learn. We're here to foster their formation as individuals and people first.
Right.
Athletics is part of that. Yeah. But it is not the driver for that.
Yep.
And we've got to make sure that we are able to protect that. And so we spent a lot of time working on that issue.
You know, one of the things that has been distinctive in the strategic framework that recently was adopted, kind of looking out to the next 10 years. Our provost, John McGreevy, is fond of saying that there's, 3 words in there that have never been in any other strategic plan, and that's South Bend, Indiana. It's a commitment to all things local. Can you tell us a little bit about what does that mean for Notre Dame and the local community?
I think it means a lot, right? Mm-hmm. We talk a lot about the national and international role of Notre Dame, but more importantly, we have a role here. And we are, we're the largest employer in the county. Let's start there, right? Mm-hmm. So we have a responsibility to be and we if you look at COVID, we didn't lay anybody off.
Yep.
There are certain responsibilities that we have that we've been able to maintain and do the right thing. So let we start with that. And I do think as we think about, so what does it mean to be the global Catholic research university, and how does that then help the community? And I think there's a lot of interface there. And I think the framework realizes that if we are going to be a place that brings in students, faculty, researchers from all over the world, we have to have a place for those people to live where they want to live. Yeah. Right. And so there's a partnership that benefits not only us, but then in fact can also benefit the town and the area. So how do we foster equitable growth? So that no one's being left behind? I think Notre Dame's actually been a leader in that, and ensuring that employees are treated well, but also that there's investment in the community. I think our commitment to RCLC, the Robinson Community and Learning Center, which provides excellent programming to the community, and we just expanded to provide daycare offsite. I think is another kind of commitment that we have. But as we look at the future, I think making solid investments here, including the new kind of facilities that we're looking at building in downtown, are really going to position not only the city, but Notre Dame to be that leader. Yeah. Right. And there's no reason why in 5, 10, 15 years, people aren't saying South Bend is one of the greatest places to live in America.
How's the transition been for you and Leah? I mean, when you think about living in a major metropolitan area for so many years, all of your married life, and then moving to South Bend, how has that transition gone?
It's gone pretty smoothly.
Yeah.
I think people outside of South Bend perhaps have an older notion or an outdated notion of what the town is. It actually is a very vibrant area with a lot going on. Now, it's not Washington, D.C. We could use a few more restaurants here and there, certainly. Hopefully that will change, over time, especially as we look at downtown South Bend.
Restaurateurs or the supporters of restaurants, we would welcome you here in the South Bend area.
Absolutely. Anything we can do to help foster additional growth. Right. There is that. And then obviously, anytime you move to a new city, there's the logistics that you have to handle. Yeah. That takes time.
Yep.
And frankly, we're not from here. Neither Leah and I are Domers, so we don't have a lot of strong cultural ties to this area. Yeah. So we're making friends. If anybody wants to come and hang out with us, drop us a line.
So we've had 3 presidents in 72 years, and you are about to help transition us from a communications and public affairs standpoint to a new president, and Father Bob Dowd. Tell us a little bit about, from your perspective, how do you manage a presidential transition and assist the new president?
Yeah, I think presidential transitions here at Notre Dame are uniquely a Notre Dame thing.
Yeah.
Because you've got a Holy Cross priest who's then going to ascend to that role. So it's slightly different than I think you would do it somewhere else. But that being said, I think one of the things that we're looking at is making sure that as Father John goes out, that his tenure and his legacy is remembered for being the transformational thing that it was, right? And that he's honored. And then we also have to make sure that then as Father Bob comes into it, he is then able to vocalize and frame what his vision for the future is, just like Father John did. You know, Father John predicted this growth in research and that we would be an AAU member.
Right.
So now we have to give words and thought to what Father Bob's vision is going to be for this institution. That, you know, it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to be part of that and help frame his thoughts as he thinks about the framework and what parts of the framework are going to be the drivers that he really wants to look at.
And I think he's
an amazing leader. I mean, he's such a thoughtful person. I've got to spend a lot of time with him over the past couple of weeks. And, you know, Notre Dame is lucky. I mean, just Father Ted, Father Malloy, Father Jenkins, Father Dowd. I mean, to have that run is unheard of in higher ed. But I think it's also, it is this place. It's the DNA of this place to have those leaders, Holy Cross priests, servant leaders, priest leaders to come in and really give all of themselves to this place. That's also unique. And it's, you know, I think the university, I think the trustees have done an amazing job in picking the successor for Father John.
I couldn't agree more. I think Father Bob is going to be a phenomenal and hopefully a very long president, you know, here for this university. One of the things that's really impressed me in your brief tenure is how data-driven your decision-making has been. And you have gone out and engaged in surveys in terms of how Notre Dame is perceived in some very nuanced ways that I think have been illustrative to Notre Dame and will help kind of shape how we move forward. Can you tell us a little bit about that data-driven approach? You clearly did that a lot for the AAU and different, you know, member institutions along the way. But give some examples about what you've discovered about Notre Dame, both in terms of, wow, we didn't realize that this was this good, and in some other areas where we've got to make sure that we drive home a message that where maybe our reality is better than our reputation.
Yeah, I think from a data-driven perspective, like I said, there are so many great stories to tell. We've got to use data to figure out what stories are really going to resonate the most with people outside the walls, right, if you will, or beyond the gleam of the dome into the rest of America. How do we figure that out? And so I rely deeply on that to find out what Americans care about and what they know about Notre Dame. So what do they know about Notre Dame? They know that Notre Dame is an excellent place for a strong undergraduate education. Mm-hmm. The research clearly shows that. It also shows that we have one of the strongest brand names in all of higher ed, up there with the Princetons and Dukes and Stanfords of the world. There's absolutely no doubt about that, empirically proven. I think where the data shows that we have fallen a little short is that it is this idea of being a research university. Mm-hmm. And you know, look, we're the newest member of the AAU. Yeah. So we haven't had, you know, all those decades of work like a place like a Duke has, or a Stanford, or a Berkeley, to tell that research side of the story. And so that's something we're going to spend a lot of time talking about. The innovation that goes on here, right? And that's, I think people think Notre Dame innovation. Yeah. Yes. Innovation. Right. We are not only excellent in undergraduate education, excellent in athletics, excellent in being a institution driven by our Catholic values. We're also an excellent place that does research. Right. That's that new leg of that chair that we're going to add to tell the story of. Yeah.
And people sometimes get estranged by the word research. But when they understand that it's research for the common good, whether it's helping to find a cure for a rare disease, or whether it's trying to help solve conflict in some of the most conflict-stricken, you know, nations of the world, or whether it's building more livable cities through our School of Architecture, and we could go on and on with these different examples. It really is exciting.
That's a wide portfolio, whether it's the work that Leo does. Yeah. I mean, Leo does amazing work on anti-poverty. What things in the anti-poverty space actually work? Right. That's a great question to answer and can have a broad impact across not only the United States, and then you take that and you look at Pulte, what they do internationally. Yeah. Then you look at Santiago Schnell and the work that they do on infectious disease. Yep. I mean, there's so many interesting things happening here that you wouldn't think. But we've got to get out and tell it. Or the story of hypersonics. This is a leading institution in hypersonics and in wireless. Right. The first wireless transmission in North America happened on this campus.
And most people don't even know that.
Most people have no idea that's the case. So that's part of that. And I think part of it is it's not new. Mm-hmm. We've always been doing it. We're just now doing it on a higher trajectory.
Right, right. So tell me a little bit about campus protests. It's the issue of the day, and it's gotten out of control, especially in major universities on the East Coast and the West Coast. We just saw some major disruption at the University of Michigan during their commencement ceremony. How much does that concern you for higher education in general, and what might be occurring here at Notre Dame?
So I think we have to look at it from several different perspectives. One is, I would actually be disappointed if students were not voicing their opinion. Right. These are young people. Mm-hmm. They're coming here to learn. They're coming here and they're going to be informed about things, and some things are going to outrage them and they should raise their voices. So I think let's look at it that way. Right. And that's always been the case.
Yeah. Our job is to nurture their idealism.
It's exactly right to some extent. And whether it was apartheid or the civil rights movement, which Father Ted famously participated in, there's a lot of things that have happened that have been driven by kind of, I wouldn't say protest, but by energy especially from young people. So, look, they're globally connected. That's good. We should actually be proud that that's a thing. And then I think there's also a commitment here, and I think at other institutions, to protect the freedom of speech and academic freedom. Right. They're not the same thing. They're slightly different. Mm-hmm. But to ensure that if students want to raise their voices, they can do so in a constructive and thoughtful manner that doesn't, and this is where I think the part where now things have been a little more difficult, that doesn't threaten others and that doesn't disrupt. And I think that's where kind of the milieu is mixed together. Yep. We allow protest here at Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. We always have. We have rules in place though, so that you don't threaten your colleagues, make them feel unsafe, and that you don't disrupt other people's ability to learn, which is why you're here. Right. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we're here to teach. Yep. And if you disrupt that, then that's a problem. Right. And I think that's where we've gotten some collision of, particularly at other institutions, where the rights of some have impinged on the rights of others. Right. And it raises the question, what do we owe each other? And I think what we've said here at Notre Dame is, you have the right to voice your opinion. Mm-hmm. You absolutely do. But you have to do it in a constructive sort of way. Yeah. And when you start interjecting and interrupting and inserting yourselves into spaces that then becomes difficult for others to use, then that's a problem. Yeah. And being clear about that, I think, is something that institutions have to do.
No, I think that's really well said. One final question. So what are you most excited about? You got a big job. You're almost coming in up to the end of your first year in this big role. What are some things that, as you look forward, get you up in the morning and make your blood percolate?
So everything right now. I mean, I get up every day and I'm really excited about being here. I think there is so much happening here. To pick one thing is impossible. Yeah. And look, simple things, right? Like, I love college football. Yeah. So I'm really excited about Coach Freeman's team next year. I think he's going to have a great team. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about Notre Dame's new vice president for research, Jeff Rhodes, who is a brilliant scientist and is really, I think, going to make a mark. As much as Notre Dame research has grown, Jeff he's going to take it into levels where I don't think we've seen. I'm excited about Father Bob. Mm-hmm. I'm going to miss Father John a lot. He hired me. I think there's a deep personal connection there. Mm-hmm. But I'm really excited about Father Bob Dowd and his leadership and his mark. And, when we look back in 20 years and say, what has Father Bob done? I'd like to be able to say I was there at the ground level, right? And to participate in that is very exciting for me. I also like my colleagues. Mm-hmm. I really enjoy coming to work and working with people like you and Ann Firth and Shan and Cullinan. I mean, we have, I would say, and we probably have here at Notre Dame the best executive team I've ever seen at an AAU institution. And I've been to a lot of AAU institutions. Yeah. As you pointed out earlier, I've done a lot of research for AAU institutions. Right. I've presented to hundreds of trustees across the AAU over time. We have a truly special team here. And the ability to work with them, I get up every day and I want to go to work because I want to know what my colleagues are working on and how I can help them. And I think there's just so much energy here. That's really humbling and inspiring to hear. And thank you for sharing that, especially given the vast experiences that you've had. So one of the things that I know we're really grateful for is that going back 182 years, this university has been devoted to Our Lady. And so we always try to close these interviews with a prayer to Our Lady, to not forget where we've come from
and to remember where we're going. So wherever you join us, please in this prayer to Our Lady. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Pedro,
Muito obrigado.
un gran prazer. And thank you for your leadership and bringing that to Notre Dame. And to all of you and your families, God bless and go Irish.